They thought they were landing at the right airport, until the girls saw a city that does not exist. A family vacation that should have been simple turned into a nightmare when 15-year-old Emma realized the plane had not taken them home, but somewhere impossible, somewhere that vanished from maps decades ago. Before we dive in, what time are you listening? Where are you from? Drop a comment below and tell me. And please like and subscribe for more videos like this. Emma pressed her face against the airplane window as the captain announced their descent. She had spent the last 2 weeks with her parents visiting her grandmother in Seattle, and now they were finally heading back to Phoenix. The flight attendants moved through the cabin, collecting trash and checking seatbelts. Her mother dozed beside her, exhausted from the trip. Her father sat across the aisle, absorbed in a book. Everything felt normal. Everything felt right. Emma watched the clouds break apart below them, revealing patches of land. She expected to see the familiar desert landscape of Arizona, the brown and tan earth she knew so well. But something was wrong. The city below was not Phoenix. Emma blinked and looked again. The buildings were different. The layout was different. She could see a massive downtown area with skyscrapers that seemed too tall, too numerous. Phoenix had tall buildings, but not like this. Not this many. She leaned closer to the window, her breath fogging the glass. The city sprawled in every direction, dense and urban in a way that Phoenix never was. There were rivers cutting through it, multiple bridges spanning dark water. Phoenix had no rivers like that. The Salt River was usually dry. This city had waterways that gleamed in the afternoon sun. Emma's heart started beating faster. She looked at the seatback screen in front of her, checking the flight information. It still said Phoenix. Arrival time in 12 minutes. But the city below could not be Phoenix. She recognized cities from pictures and videos. This looked more like Chicago or maybe even New York, but it was not quite right for those either. The architecture was strange, a mix of styles that did not match anywhere she knew. Some buildings looked modern, glass and steel reaching into the sky. Others looked older, with ornate details that reminded her of old photographs. She saw what appeared to be a massive park in the center of the city, bigger than any park Phoenix had. And there were so many people visible even from this height. Crowds moving through streets and plazas. Emma shook her mother's arm. "Mum, wake up, Mum." Her mother stirred, eyes opening slowly. "What is it, sweetie?" Emma pointed out the window. "Look at the city. That is not Phoenix." Her mother leaned over, squinting down at the ground below. For a moment, she said nothing. Then she frowned. "It must be Phoenix. The screen says Phoenix." But Emma could hear doubt in her voice. "Does that look like Phoenix to you?" Emma asked. Her mother stared longer. "Maybe we are approaching from a different direction. Maybe it is a part of the city we do not usually see." Emma shook her head. She pulled out her phone, even though it was still in airplane mode. She had downloaded maps before the trip. She opened the Phoenix map and studied it, then looked back out the window. Nothing matched. The street grid was wrong. The density was wrong. Everything was wrong. She felt a knot forming in her stomach. "Dad," she called across the aisle. Her father looked up from his book. "Dad, look outside. Tell me that is Phoenix." He leaned toward his window, peered down, and his expression changed. Emma saw confusion cross his face, then concern. "That is odd," he said quietly. He pressed the call button for the flight attendant. A young woman in a crisp uniform appeared. "Yes, sir. How can I help you?" Emma's father pointed out the window. "Can you tell me what city that is?" The flight attendant glanced out, barely looking. "That is Phoenix, sir. We will be landing shortly." But she said it too quickly, too automatically. Emma's father pressed. "Are you certain? Because that does not look like Phoenix to my family." The flight attendant's smile tightened. "I assure you, we are landing in Phoenix, Arizona, as scheduled. Please make sure your seatbelt is fastened." She walked away before Emma's father could ask anything else. Emma looked at her parents. Her mother had gone pale. Her father was staring out the window again, his book forgotten. Around them, other passengers were starting to notice. Emma heard a man behind her say to his wife, "Honey, where are we?" She heard another passenger ask a flight attendant, "Is this Phoenix?" The responses were always the same. "Yes, this is Phoenix. We are on schedule. Everything is fine." But Emma could see the flight attendants exchanging glances, could see the tension in their movements. They knew something was wrong too. The plane descended lower. Emma could see the city in more detail now. She saw trolley cars moving through streets. Trolley cars. Phoenix did not have trolley cars. She saw buildings with signs in English, but the style of the signs looked old-fashioned, like something from decades ago. She saw cars on the roads, but they looked wrong too. Some looked modern, but others looked like vintage cars, the kind you only saw in museums or classic car shows. Nothing made sense. It was as if the city below existed in multiple time periods at once. Emma felt dizzy. She gripped the armrest. "Mum, something is really wrong." Her mother reached over and took her hand. "I know, baby." I know. Emma's father had unbuckled and was standing now, ignoring the seatbelt sign. He moved to a window on the other side of the plane, trying to get a different view. Other passengers were doing the same. The flight attendants were trying to get everyone seated, their voices sharp with barely controlled panic. Emma heard the captain's voice over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, please return to your seats immediately. We are beginning our final approach." His voice sounded strained. Emma looked out again. They were low enough now that she could see people on the ground. She could see their clothes. Some wore modern clothing, jeans and t-shirts and business suits, but others wore styles that looked like they came from the 1930s or 40s. Long skirts and high-waisted pants and hats that nobody wore anymore. Emma's breath caught in her throat. This was impossible. This was not real. The plane tilted, turning toward what must be the airport. Emma saw runways ahead, a terminal building, but even the airport looked wrong. It was too small for a major city, and the terminal had an Art Deco style that looked like it belonged in an old movie. The wheels touched down with a jolt. The plane shook as it rolled along the runway, engines reversing thrust. Emma felt tears stinging her eyes. She did not understand what was happening. None of this was possible. Cities do not just appear. Cities do not exist in multiple time periods at once. But she had seen it. She had seen it all. The plane slowed and turned, taxiing toward the terminal. Through the window, Emma could see ground crew workers. They wore uniforms that looked both modern and vintage at the same time. She saw luggage carts that looked like they came from different decades. She saw vehicles that should not exist together in the same place. The plane came to a stop at a gate. The seatbelt sign chimed off, but nobody moved. The cabin was silent except for the sound of people breathing, scared and confused. The captain's voice came over the intercom again. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport. Local time is 3:15 in the afternoon. Please remain seated until the seatbelt sign has been turned off and it is safe to move about the cabin." But the seatbelt sign was already off, and Emma knew deep in her bones that they were not in Phoenix. They were somewhere else, somewhere impossible. A flight attendant opened the door to the jet bridge. Emma heard voices from outside, heard the sounds of an airport, announcements over speakers, the beeping of vehicles, all normal airport sounds. But Emma did not trust normal anymore. Her father was standing again, pulling their carry-on bags from the overhead compartment. Her mother was gathering her things with shaking hands. Around them, passengers were slowly standing, moving into the aisle, but everyone was quiet. Everyone had seen what Emma had seen. They all knew something was wrong. Emma followed her parents off the plane. The jet bridge looked normal. White walls, carpeted floor, the slight incline leading to the terminal. But when they emerged into the gate area, Emma stopped. The terminal looked wrong. The architecture was a strange blend of old and new. Art Deco flourishes mixed with modern materials. The furniture looked vintage but new at the same time. And the people? Emma stared at the people in the terminal. Just like in the city, some wore modern clothes and some wore clothing from decades past. A woman in a business suit walked past a man in a fedora and suspenders. A teenager in jeans and sneakers stood next to an elderly woman in a dress that looked like it came from the 1940s. Emma's mother grabbed her father's arm. "What is this? What is happening?" Her father shook his head. He looked as scared as Emma felt. They moved through the terminal in a daze, following signs toward baggage claim. Other passengers from their flight clustered together, speaking in low, frightened voices. Emma heard someone say, "This is not Phoenix." She heard someone else say, "Where are we?" A woman was crying, asking a terminal employee for help. The employee, wearing a uniform that looked both modern and old-fashioned, smiled politely and said, "You are in Phoenix. Is there something I can help you with?" They reached baggage claim. The carousel started moving and luggage began appearing. Emma's father grabbed their bags mechanically. They stood there, the three of them, surrounded by other confused passengers, surrounded by people who belonged to different time periods in a terminal that should not exist. Emma looked up at the departure and arrival screens. They showed flights to and from normal cities: Los Angeles, Denver, Dallas, Seattle, as if this were a normal airport, as if nothing were wrong. "We need to go outside," Emma's father said. His voice was hoarse. "We need to see where we really are." They moved toward the exit, rolling their luggage behind them. The automatic doors slid open, and they stepped outside into the Arizona heat. Except it was not Arizona. Emma knew immediately. The air felt different. The sun felt different. And the city spread before them was definitely, absolutely not Phoenix. It was the city she had seen from the plane, impossible and wrong. Skyscrapers reaching into a clear sky. Rivers that should not exist. Streets filled with a chaotic mix of vehicles from different eras. People everywhere, dressed in clothing that spanned decades. A taxi pulled up. It was a yellow cab, but the model looked like something from the 1950s. Perfectly restored, but somehow brand new. The driver rolled down his window. "Need a ride?" he called. He wore modern sunglasses, but a vintage cap. Emma's father stared at him. "Where are we?" he asked. The driver looked confused. "You are at the airport. Phoenix Sky Harbor. Where do you need to go?" Emma's father's voice rose. "What city is this?" The driver's confusion deepened. "Phoenix. Are you feeling all right, sir?" Emma felt her legs shaking. This could not be happening. Cities do not just appear. Reality does not work this way. But she was standing here, breathing this air, seeing this impossible place. Her mother was crying now, quiet tears running down her face. Her father looked lost, more lost than Emma had ever seen him. Other passengers from their flight were emerging from the terminal, stopping short when they saw the city, their faces showing the same shock and fear that Emma felt. Emma pulled out her phone, turned off airplane mode. Service bars appeared. She had service. She opened her browser and typed Phoenix, Arizona. The results showed normal information about Phoenix. Pictures of the city she knew, the desert city with the brown landscape and reasonable skyline. She looked up from her phone to the city before her. They did not match. She typed, "Cities that do not exist." She typed, "Phantom cities." She typed, "How is this possible?" Nothing that came up explained what she was seeing. A security officer approached. He wore a uniform that looked standard for airport security, but something about it was slightly off, slightly wrong. "Is everything all right here?" he asked. Emma's father turned to him. "What city is this?" The officer frowned. "Phoenix, Arizona, sir. Is there a problem?" Emma's father swept his arm toward the skyline. "That is not Phoenix. Phoenix does not look like that." The officer followed his gesture, looked at the city, then looked back at them with concern. "Sir, have you been drinking? Are you feeling unwell? Do you need medical assistance?" Emma realized the officer truly saw nothing wrong. To him, this was Phoenix. This was normal. But to Emma, to her parents, to everyone from their flight, this was impossible. This was a city that should not exist, could not exist, but did. Emma thought about maps, about geography, about everything she knew about the world. Phoenix was in the desert. Phoenix was spread out and low. Phoenix did not have rivers cutting through it. Phoenix did not exist in multiple time periods at once. But this place did. This place was here, solid and real, and they were standing in it. Emma's mother spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "How do we get home?" It was the question Emma had been too afraid to ask. If this was not Phoenix, if they had landed somewhere impossible, how did they get back to the real Phoenix? How did they get back to the world that made sense? Her father had no answer. The security officer was speaking into his radio, calling for assistance, probably thinking they were having some kind of medical emergency. More passengers from their flight gathered around, everyone with the same questions, the same fear. Emma looked back at the terminal, then at the city, then at the sky. The sun was starting to move toward the horizon. Evening would come soon. They would need somewhere to stay. They would need to figure out what to do. But how do you figure out what to do when reality itself has broken? Emma closed her eyes, counted to 10, then opened them again. The impossible city was still there. She could hear traffic. She could smell food cooking somewhere. She could feel the warm pavement under her feet. This was real. Somehow, impossibly, this was real. Emma thought about the plane ride, about the moment she first looked out the window and saw the wrong city. She thought about how the flight attendants had insisted everything was fine. She thought about the captain's voice, strained and scared. They had all known. The crew had known. But what could they do? A plane does not turn around mid-flight because passengers see the wrong city below. And maybe the crew had not seen it. Maybe only the passengers saw the truth. Emma did not know. She did not know anything anymore except that she was standing in a place that should not exist, and she had no idea how to leave. Her father was arguing with the security officer now, his voice rising. Other passengers were joining in, everyone trying to explain that this was not Phoenix, that something was terribly wrong. The officer called for backup. More security arrived. They looked at the passengers with a mixture of concern and suspicion. Emma heard one officer say to another, maybe something in the cabin air. Mass hysteria. But it was not hysteria. It was truth. They had flown to a city that did not exist on any map, a city that blended decades, a city that was impossible but real. Emma turned away from the argument. She walked a few steps toward the city, looking up at the nearest buildings. She could see people in windows. She could see signs on storefronts, a mix of languages and styles. She could see the strange blend of old and new everywhere she looked. And she realized something that made her blood run cold. This city was not just impossible because of how it looked. This city was impossible because it existed outside of normal space, normal time, maybe even normal reality. They had not just flown to the wrong destination. They had flown somewhere that should not be reachable by airplane. Somewhere that should not be reachable at all. Emma heard her name. Her mother was calling her. She turned back. Her parents looked so small and scared standing there with their luggage, surrounded by security officers and confused passengers. Emma walked back to them. She took her mother's hand. She took her father's hand. They stood together, a family in an impossible place, and Emma made a decision. If they were stuck here, if they could not understand this place, then they would survive it anyway. They would find a way, because that is what families do. They survive together. The sun continued its descent toward the horizon. The impossible city glowed in the golden light. Somewhere in that city, there had to be answers. There had to be someone who understood what this place was, how they got here, how they could leave. Emma looked at her parents. "We need to go into the city," she said. Her father started to protest, but Emma cut him off. Standing here arguing with security is not helping. We need to find real answers. And the answers are not here at the airport. Her mother nodded slowly. Her father looked between them, then nodded too. They left the other passengers still arguing with security. They got into the vintage taxi with the confused driver. "Take us downtown," Emma's father said. The driver shrugged, started the meter, and pulled away from the terminal. Emma watched the airport recede behind them. She watched the impossible city grow larger ahead, and she wondered if they would ever see the real Phoenix again, ever see their real home, ever return to a world that made sense. The taxi merged into traffic, surrounded by cars from different decades, carrying passengers dressed in different eras, all driving through a city that existed nowhere on Earth, yet here they were, driving through it anyway. Emma leaned her head against the window and watched the impossible world roll past, knowing that nothing would ever be the same again. So if you like this video, please like and subscribe for more videos like this.